This episode is brought to you by us here at Elevated Lifestyle Lab. We are running a month-long special this month, guys. We're offering 30% off for the full month of July. All you have to do is go to elevatedlifestylelab.com, enter coupon code FREEDOM on the checkout screen. You're going to get 30% off the full cart, guys. Anything on our website. Right now we have about 28 items up there, vitamins and supplements, anything you need to get through your workout, to recover, we've got it. Immune boosters, daily multivitamins. Go check it out, guys. We're offering 30% off again the whole month of July. Go to elevatedlifestylelab.com. Enter promo code FREEDOM at the checkout screen. Get 30% off. Spend over $100, guys. We're going to cover shipping for you. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks. All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Carousel of Life podcast. I'm here with Jimmy and Paul. How we doing, boys?
Awesome.
Great.
Good. Thank you guys for coming back in with us tonight. We have a cool episode. It should be interesting because this topic can get a little dicey when you talk about this anywhere outside, like maybe like just us.
We talking about money? Oh, the other one.
The other one.
Politics?
So, yeah. We're going to bypass that one. Yeah, this is the other. So this topic tonight is about religion and spirituality, guys. So it's an interesting topic because for me personally, like I'm not sure if I'm on a carousel for this particular topic. I'm more of like on a search or more of on a journey to kind of discover. Just because with this whole self-development that I've been doing as I've been growing the last few years, it's also made me it just made me question everything, right? It's like everything I've changed from what I've learned when I'm growing up is all because I've been imprinted with that. I was surrounded by that, and those are the behaviors I adapted, and that just goes through everything that I kind of got brought up, that, just like everybody else. So that kind of led into my whole discovery of like religion or spirituality. I still haven't labeled myself as like a Christian or an atheist or Buddha or any of the other religions. I haven't really found my niche, but I figure we could do a podcast about this because I think this topic a lot of people talk about, a lot of people take it seriously. So I know you guys both have a little more history in the background of religion as far as growing up with it a little more. Jimmy, I know you're a little bit older and you've kind of you have a description of what you would probably call like your category that you might fall in, because it's funny. I was plugging my tire at the gas station a couple months back, and I had a little plug kit. I plugged the tire. Somebody came up behind me. They had a flat tire. It was going low too. I said, "Hey man, let me plug it. I got an extra little thingy." Blah blah. And he's like, "Oh, thank you so much." He was very appreciative, and he's like, "Oh, you're Christian, right? You got to be a Christian guy." And it kind of threw me off because, it's definitely not offensive by any means. He's meaning something very, he's trying to give me a, just trying to say thank you, and you're doing a really nice thing. But I found it interesting that it's like, I'm not, you're just labeling it, and I get it. There's nothing wrong with it, but it also made me think like, it makes you think like, well, if I were to label myself something, what would it be? But it's, for me personally, it's just really going through this journey. For me, like most recently is, it's kind of the opposite, but it's the same. Is like I've been learning so much about neuroscience and the behavioral stuff of how the brain works, and looking back at like a lot of things that people do as they pray, they help people, and it's all this chemistry. It's just a chemical manufacturing going off in your brain, and I think that has so much to do with how you feel, right? Because like Joe Dispenza will do studies on the brain and the way the brain looks like when you're in deep meditation or if you're in prayer. It's like the same thing, right? It's like the feeling you get, you're touched by the hand of God, or is it just a chemical release going off in your brain, right? Like those are the interesting topics for me. Is like, when you get into, living a good life and treat thy neighbor like you would, I can't even quote it because I don't know it as well.
That's okay.
But
I think you get the gist.
Yeah. So that, that's kind of been, that's like my journey through it right now is kind of just wading through everything. And it's interesting. I was listening to a podcast with Will Smith the other day. He's starting to do them. He did one with a guy named Jay Shetty. And they were talking about how Will and his wife Jada, like for every year, they would pick one religious book and read it from front to cover, whether it was the Bible, whether it was all the other books. And so they would kind of get a grasp of what everybody's talking about. And I found that to be really cool because it really gives, that's the thing that's like talking about this stuff. It's like, I haven't read the Bible. I don't go to church a whole lot to be able to like, no, that's not right. Cause
yeah, but you have to know the other side. Like I read most of the Quran, like the English, version. You have to, if you're going to judge, criticize, or adopt, you have to read the book. You can't just listen to the person.
Right.
And at the end of the day, you still have to make up your own mind because this is a human that decided to write these words on paper and what that's all really religion is, correct?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, it's all based on faith, and I'll kind of give a little bit of my backstory here. Is long story short, I was raised super conservative in the Christian religion, and for a long time would consider myself a Christian. Probably still do to a certain extent, but when I kind of dove into the personal development world, I started to kind of deconstruct my faith and really try to grasp and understand what it was that I actually believed and had faith in. And this is coming from in my teenage years and into my early 20s, like I was solidified in my faith in Christianity and what I believed, and my belief in the Bible, and my belief that there was a God and that Jesus died for our sins, like all that, we bought into that, and that's what I grew up in. And I'll even take it a step further, when I first started going to church when I was like 3rd, 4th grade, and my parents kind of they didn't grow up in church, so they didn't have that background. So they were coming. We basically did a life flip flop. So they were partying, they were kind of doing all these things, doing whatever they wanted, blah blah blah, and then they flip flopped to this super conservative lifestyle. My dad stopped drinking, and he threw out all of his old music, and we were only listening like Christian music. Like we just went hardcore that other direction. And that's how I was raised, and I was raised at a time during an era in the Christian church called purity culture. So it was huge back when I'm 35 now, but that was a huge part of me growing up. My teenage years is my wife and I's story. Like we met January of 2006, started dating in February, were engaged by July, and married in December. So it was less than a year from when we met to when we were married. That was like a normal thing, and we both lost our virginity on our wedding night. Like that was like the hardcore conservativeness or whatever the lifestyle that we were living in. That's how I grew up. So I was actually talking about this with somebody today. Like I don't know that I'm going to teach that to my children today. Like I don't that lifestyle or certain aspects of my Christian faith, the purity culture that I was raised in, all of that actually ended up doing some damage to my life now. And it's caused repercussions, good and bad. I know, Jimmy, we've talked about this, but and I don't have the life, or I don't have the life experience that you guys had. Everybody's story is different, but so it's easy to go, what if I was raised different, or what if I made different choices? So I think that's easy, and I obviously have a perspective on it. But right now, we're not actively going to church. I do believe there is a God. I look around at just everything, and I don't think that this happened by accident. There is a God for sure. To the depths of what I used to believe, I don't believe certain things that I used to believe. That one of the reasons that I've gotten to this point, to be quite honest with you, is through hurt. So being hurt, growing up and being hurt by the system that I grew up in, having negative things happen to me through that system has caused me to reject or react negatively to what it is now. So yeah. I'm in the middle of it. I don't know where this lands. I really don't know where this lands, and I've been talking about this, like you said, for years. But I'm okay with it. I'm more at peace right now, just being uncertain, than when I was like certain that life was the way it was, black and white. Here's the law, and here's all of the things and how you should live. Like there was uncertainty, and it was confusing, and there was a lot of.
Well, why was there confusion? Was it because not your relationship with God, but you're looking at the people who are claiming they're pure, and then you see impurities in how they behave?
I think it was both, and I had a good buddy of mine that I grew up with. We met when I first started going to church, so he's actually a very good buddy, one of my closest friends even to this day. He was more, we would call it, on fire for God, growing up than I was, and he got to this point before I did. So I saw him starting to go through this deconstruction of faith, and I'm like, how did somebody so committed to this lifestyle, more committed than myself, start to fall away from it? Mm-hmm. And that terrified me, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I still, I still am unsure of what to do with it. that was a lot. But
it's interesting with the kids, though, right? It's like my son's starting to bring up God. Like, who's God? Where's God? He's up in the sky. Can you see him? How big is he? What's his name? Like all these questions, and I'm like starting. And now it's really put into perspective. Like I got to kind of get a game plan as far as like how I want to raise them,
or just talk to him.
Yeah, just talk to him about it.
Yeah. I mean, my big thing is like, so my son, he's got an amazing relationship with God. I say like I'm on dial-up, and my son has a full connection. So, I mean, in all seriousness, because but what I've always told my son is that never put your faith in religion, but put your faith in whatever that connection that you have, because men and women, they will always fail. They will always they always say like, when you first meet like your idols, whether it's an actor or someone that you always kind of put up on a pedestal, and then you get to know them a little bit. You're like,
this guy's a dick.
Not as amazing as, because we talked about this earlier, you put them up on a pedestal and you create something they're not. And that's not fair to them either.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And there's things that I, whenever I do fail as a husband or as a father, I go back in and I apologize. My father, and to his credit, I grew up in an environment, in a world where I do a lot of self-improvement, where I know if I fail, I need to go back in and apologize. Say, hey, I did not live up to the standard that we've set for this family, and I apologize. So I think that sometimes when we look from afar, these people that are on stage, and you just assume that they've got something that you don't have, some type of connection, that's just not true.
Yeah.
And you talked about, the neural connection and what that means. It's not just religion. It's also business. Like what faith does a person have when nothing's going right? There's no money in the account. You're going to the payday advance place to get $260 just to make sure you put gas, in your truck. It's faith. Okay. And some people have that and some people don't. Now through there, you have to, sit down and really think about like, okay, so is this blind faith where I've got this person up on stage telling me what I should believe? Or do I really have a connection with something, whatever it is, whether it's, how this universe was created, or that you believe that there is a God that we've kind of grew up knowing in Christianity, or maybe it's being a Buddhist. But it's that connection, understanding that there is something larger than us. There's something going on that we just can't explain, and science can. And I love science. There's things that when I look at science that just make sense, but then there's little parts, little things that just, they can't put everything together. And that's what gives me that faith that there is something larger that's got a hand in what this world that we're living in.
Yeah. I mean, one of the frustrating things for me and what I've come to realize recently is that the way I was raised, in the religious system that I was raised, there was a worship of certainty, and that there was we talked about faith constantly, but it wasn't ever taught that way. It was that they
don't
had
doubt.
Yeah, don't doubt, don't question. Like what Will and Will Smith and his wife is doing. That's a no-no. You don't go read other books. You're not allowed to do that. You don't listen to non-Christian music. You don't, and it's all of these things that you can't do. And that was a struggle for me because again, just being raised in the system and the way I was raised. So like I was married 9 days before my 21st birthday. Like my wife, she was 23 at the time, and I was 20. On our honeymoon, had to buy the champagne for us to celebrate. Like it was 9 days before my 21st birthday. I didn't drink. I didn't party. I didn't do any of that stuff. So, that's the environment that I lived in, and it was always these rules. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't do that. So when I became an adult, and really this was sucky for me and something that we struggled with, but I went from literally living with my parents, and we talked about this in the marriage episode, to being married. I didn't go off to college. So I was learning to be an adult and be married at the same time. And talk about the perfect storm of just an absolute shit show waiting to happen. That was a big deal. But again, it was all of these things, all these rules. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't do that. Now fast forward, I'm an adult. I'm married, and I start to maybe I'm gonna have a beer with dinner again. But that was something that I wasn't allowed to do. Like it was frowned upon. So I start to kind of do things that normal adults do, and I'm still getting, oh, you can't do that. You can't do that. And I'm like, listen, motherfucker, I'm an adult. Like this, I don't need you telling me anymore. So it's just, I feel like I grew up under the thumb of somebody, and again, that couples in with my personality. From time to time I let people walk over me, and that's I don't like confrontation, whatever it is, but that's a thing. So again, this is me like just totally like rebelling and reacting to the negativity that's happened in my life. So I have to write that because that shouldn't affect my relationship with God, at all. And that's something that I'm kind of working through and trying to understand. But kind of like all the personal development stuff, you don't know what you don't know. So when I started learning about other things, and that's the way, like, again, the way I was raised, I looked at the world around me, and we as Christians, and especially, again, the religious system I was raised, you look at the world around you and you go, it's all bad. Like, all of this is bad. So I would walk around looking at people that were not Christians and like judging, very judgmental, and even into the natural world, like, it's all bad. Like, the world is all bad. And this was actually like literally 2 years ago. I was doing 75 hard. I'm on a rowing machine, and I'm listening to a podcast called You Have Permission. Great podcast for the guy that runs it. He's a Christian. He's been to like seminary, and he's a psychologist, and he brings on really, really smart people. But they talk about religion. He's super liberal. He's in Seattle. But anyways, I was just listening to this podcast and understanding, like, the switch flipped. Like, instead of me looking around and being judgmental, like, my brain flipped, and I was like, holy crap, like, the world is okay. It's not me versus them. I'm not in the in team. Like, that's that. But again, that was the mindset, and that was the mindset that I had growing up. And looking back at that, I'm disgusted. So when we were talking earlier about how this was going to be an interesting podcast, because I have some very negative feelings about the way I was raised, but I still believe some of the things I was raised, but a majority of them, I don't believe in. Like I told you guys earlier, I don't go to church right now because I don't want to support right now the system, the business of church. I've worked at churches. I've been a part of churches. I've helped plant churches. The business side.
Do you pray at dinner?
Yeah, every now and then. Yeah. I mean, and I pray, I think about God constantly throughout the day. I read some verses, but there was a time where that was a thing, like, get up and do your devotional time, or like you're reading scripture and you're studying it. And I would do Bible studies, and I've even taught sermons, like looking at the original Greek and the Hebrew. And I've got Hebrew here, I've got Greek here. They're religious tattoos. Like, I was immersed in that culture, and it's confusing because, and that's why I'm struggling with it so much, is because I was so certain at one point in my life, and now I don't know. So that's like terrifying to me. But again, I'm at peace.
Isn't most things like that though? As we get to learn more and more about different facets of our life, we realize how much we thought we knew.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we should be scared by that, but just understand that that's growth.
Yeah,
that's maturity.
Yeah.
Obviously you have some negative connotation to religion as a foundation, as a system. Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts? I know a little bit different upbringing, but
yeah, I mean, it wasn't, like growing up, we went to primarily Baptist church when I'm from Tennessee originally, and but my parents weren't really big in religion or Jesus or God. It was just like a weekly thing. We would go, and I don't remember much of it. When it gets up into my 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, I don't really remember going except for like holidays and stuff like that. But nobody was really there to like tell me what their philosophy was on how we're here, or what their belief is, or what the power of God can do, or like it wasn't really around like that. So that's kind of where it's kind of like limbo, right? So it's like I saw like a traditional style Baptist church when I was younger. I knew I wasn't. I just the way they talk and the way the old Bible, all the words, it's just like.
It's a little much.
My ADD kicks in. And I'm just like, like just like look at that mosquito. Like like I'm not paying attention.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, the next time in my life where I had to kind of ask myself like what's going on is when I check myself into rehab, right? Because it's like that's the whole thing. You have to believe in a higher power. You have to surrender your power and admit that you're powerless against this addiction. And like so that's where I was praying every night when I first got sober, like 10, 11 years ago. But at that point I realized like who am I praying to? I don't know, like, do I believe in God? Do I believe in Jesus? Do I believe in a higher power? And I would label it as like a higher power, right? Like there's something out there. Who knows? I don't think it's somebody like playing the strings, right?
Yeah, I agree.
And that's why I think like this whole experience is interesting, like the human experience. Like I think mentally, like something in the brain, like it fulfills us. It gives us some kind of maybe protection. Like it gives us the faith that something's out there that's bigger than us, that's doing all this. But it's interesting because it's, I don't know. It's like, because I've been, you know, and this is just for me personally as far as my life experiences. But it's like, I remember my mom got me this like a little poster. It's like a plaque, and it says, "Things happen for a reason. Just believe." Right? Like I always used to like, oh, I love that. Like that's cool. But then as I'm like getting older and I'm realizing like, I don't think that's true. Like, I don't know. Like, it had, like, in general, I guess it sounds cool, but it's like everything that's happened is, and I don't want to take away about any power of, like, God or anything, but, like, everything that's happened for me is because I put my foot forward and started doing the work, right? Like, I didn't pray my way into having this podcast, right? Like, I fucking had to do the work. Like, you know, it's like maybe if I look at it into the realm of like the idea popped into my head from a God, I don't even know if that's really I believe in that.
Now, do you think that people are born with certain things that they're given at birth? Like certain your son, gifts. Like what made your son start asking those questions? You said there's not religion.
School, but I think maybe school or YouTube.
Maybe
fucking YouTube. Maybe. I don't know if as far as being born. I mean, I guess over the years, there's probably something genetically that might pop in to have like a belief or something greater than ourselves, right? Because I'm sure 10,000 years ago, like everybody really put a crutch on religion, right? Like that's what ran this world. So
well, for governments, governments is very convenient to have people believe in a religion. But having a void where there's something out there that you just can't understand. I mean, some of our greatest scientists over the years, I mean, the more and more they got into, religion and trying to understand, I'm going to solve this problem for mankind, this human experience, as you said. And the more and more they got involved, the more and more they're saying, there's something missing. So I think there's something there. I don't know what it is.
It's like some kind of energy, right? It's like I don't downplay the power of prayer, but at the same time, like, does it work? But then, like, you see, if you're in like a group of people and there's like some vibe and energy going on, like you might feel it, right? I don't know what I'm feeling right now, but there's like
I had experiences
something right now, right? Like, so it's hard to deny like there's nothing going on, but the fact that I don't know, is there?
I think we all agree though is that if so, you and I are very active in the foster care program. Maybe not as active now, but over the years, I cannot send prayers to those children. I have to actually get in my car and go there, pick them up, put clothes on them, bring them to my home, and show them love. So should I pray? Yes, that's just my belief. However, to use that as some type of, like you said, crutch, that now I don't actually have to take action and face responsibility for what I'm doing in my life, that's bullshit. So I think that a lot of people, that's kind of a cop-out. They say that, well, I'm just going to pray for you. Well, if that person needs, one of my best friends, in the hospital 3 months, lost everything, voluntarily repossessed my truck, came to the hospital, and he, at the time, I'm pretty sure he's, was an atheist, if he's not still, and he believes in some things, but not the Christian religion. He said, I'm going to give you $1,000. I said, well, I'm not taking your money. He goes, well, you don't have a choice. You have nothing. I'm giving you $1,000. He didn't pray for me. He came to the hospital and said, friend to friend, here, I'm helping you out. Now, as a Christian person, I do that sometimes in the name of, because I think as a Christian, I should do certain things, just like the gentleman who, when you helped him, if he's Christian, he thinks, wow, like this must be another person that I have agreement with. If he was Muslim, he would have said, Shalom, like he would have believed that you were Muslim. So I think that we have this misconception that just because someone's helping us, that they're like us in our beliefs. And that's just not the case. An atheist can pull over the side of the road and give you a gas can just as well as a Christian. I've seen enough people flick people off leaving church on Sunday as I have seen people outside of Walmart. So, we just have to understand that just because that this is an aspect of what you believe, is that, okay, well, how are you operating in your day-to-day life? Does it match if you're a Buddhist? Do you really follow that faith? Same with Christianity. Do you really do the things that you're supposed to be doing, not what the religion or those humans are telling us to do, but what your beliefs are telling you to do?
Yeah, and one of the problems that I have is that I was raised, like you were talking about the prayer thing, I was raised that way. You have a problem, pray it away. And there was almost little to no action. Like, it's not, whether you needed something or whether you were trying to get over it, like, you just had to pray, and God was gonna do whatever He was gonna do.
And I think that somewhere along the line, because I've given two things to God, where I literally was driving home one night, 19 years old. I had this massive thing that I could not take. I just couldn't take it on. And I said, I'm giving it to you. First time I've ever done that. Well, it was the first time. And all of a sudden, that release of concern, of pressure. Now, it could have been just a false, belief that was going away.
Yeah.
But I felt it like come off my shoulders, and that problem was no longer in my existence. So I think when that happens, when someone is able to give something up, whatever it is, it could be a relationship, it could be money problems, it could be, whatever's going on in your world. You then take that and you misdiagnose it for that's how you should operate, that you should just give everything, to this being, this God, whatever it is that you think is out there. And I think that over time, as humans, we tell the next generation, and all of a sudden everything, has to be to prayer.
Yeah. What about you, Jimmy? Did you grew up in the church as far as being like a younger kid?
Yeah, so I think it was 9 or 10, and a friend of mine down the street invited me to church. After that, I was going pretty regularly. I would go to many different churches. Like when I was probably 16 to 20, I went to Cornerstone, and when we went there, it could be 2-3 hours. It was an old school Baptist, like running around, amazing. And at the end, if you wanted to pray for people, we'd go up front. I remember my girlfriend at the time, she's like, I can't believe you were there for 3 hours. What were you really doing? I'm like, no, we were, sometimes it's an hour and a half, sometimes it's 3 hours. And I went to a lot of different churches. Had a girl who, a woman who worked for me, had a child that was disabled, and then 3 other children, single mom. And she asked me to come down to her church in Miami. And when I walked in, I knew it was going to be interesting because I was the only white person in the entire parking lot. And we get in there, and I've got like this white shirt with a yellow tie, so I stuck out. And after, running around and singing and everything, they're like, so do we have any, new people here? Any guests? I'm like, raise my hand, obviously. So that's what's hard when I look at what we're dealing with. Right now, we have a lot of, there's a lot of division based on the color of your skin. And when I'm in that building, I have more in common with those people, just because there's a certain core values that I share with most Christians. There's a lot of atheists that have the same freaking core values, and there's a lot of people, and that's why I wanted to get to know really, the Muslim religion, because right after 9/11, I'm being told, from this TV programmer what to think. I'm like, I'm not going to just listen to what you're trying to tell me. And I dove into the Quran. And it's one of those things where if I can trust you, if you share the same characteristics and core beliefs that I have, I don't care the religion, I don't care the color of your skin, I will call you a brother or a sister. So that's what's always been kind of an underlining thing for me, is that I think that a lot of religions share a lot of the same characteristics, and I would call atheism a religion. And it is.
Yeah, somebody gave me a definition of what atheism is, and I've always heard it from like the negative side, right? Like you don't believe in anything, you're a terrible person. But then I heard somebody on a podcast the other day explain it in like a normal way, right? Like it's just like the lack of evidence, right? It's just like his belief, but it's funny how where you get the source from, it's like downgrades it. But yeah, I would consider the same thing, right?
And you also have to understand, like Penn and Teller, the 2 comedians.
Love that.
So Penn, he's a big time atheist, and he was describing. I think he was on a talk show, and he said that a woman came up after his show and gave him a Bible and was praying for him and really wanted to save him. And he goes, "Look, people thought I should get offended. This woman actually believes that if I do not, take Christ and into my life, then I'm going to hell. She's the only one that's ever come up to me. All you other Christians who claim that you care for me, you don't. So why would I be offended? Why would I call her names? I accepted her in, and I let her talk to me, and because I knew that she truly was stepping out of her comfort zone to care for me. And that's just that's the kind of the perspective that we have to take. If an atheist really comes to me and just truly wants to get me to understand the science, I'm going to listen to him. At the end of it, I can still make up my own mind on what I'm going to take in and what I think is valid points. But I think that we've gotten so divisive, and it's because it's sound bits. Like it's little, you're on social media, you have a 2-minute conversation with someone, your identity is being attacked, so now you fight against it rather than just saying, hey, this is another person that they seem somewhat intelligent, somewhat reasonable. Maybe I should listen to what they're saying, and I can still, am I so am I so self-conscious that I feel that they're in a 2-minute conversation just going to turn all of my beliefs, or can I just understand what they're saying and take it for what it is and respect, their point of view?
Yeah, that doesn't happen.
Not much, but that's where we have to stop that. That's where we have to make that change.
Yeah, that's one of the things that the belief in hell, the this is probably opening a can of worms, but that's one of the things, like, I'm unsure of what I believe about that, because I grew up, again, I would look at someone like you when I was 20 and I would say, this is a cool guy.
Going to hell.
You're going to burn for all of eternity in hell, separate from God, and I'm going to heaven because I got the golden ticket. Like, I don't believe that anymore. Like, I don't know what I believe about it, but that's the way I was raised, and that's why my worldview, looking at other people, was like, I was the in crowd. I had the golden ticket. I'm going to heaven because I asked Jesus into my heart. I said the prayer, and
voila.
And that's literally what I was taught my entire life growing up in church. And that's one of the big problems that I have with it is just working through that in my mind. And in one sentence we're talking about how loving God is, but then He's going to send a good majority of people to hell. Like, there's again, that's like opening such a big can of worms here.
It is.
So it's just like, that's what I'm trying to work through. And that's what I don't know. And like I had a conversation with somebody, about this and kind of my beliefs. And this person asked me, he was like, what, so you don't believe in absolute truth? And I'm like, well, yeah, I do. And you don't have it, and neither do I. Like, you think that you have this truth, and you've unlocked the secrets to this life, this existence. Go fuck yourself. Like, there's no way you can't do that. Like,
as soon as someone starts talking like that, I'm saying, do you really think that Jesus was born on December 25th?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it was the spring, right?
Yeah.
Like, so it's one of those things where there were men who were really trying to document what they thought was the Word of God. But they were men.
Yeah.
They were human. And I get the words in red. It's supposed to be, Jesus' words. But I doubt that too. And I do believe that Jesus came, He died for my sins. I believe there's a God. But it gets a little distorted, little blurry after that.
Do you think the Bible's the inerrant Word of God?
I think most.
Word for word.
No.
Period.
No.
Down
it can't
to this.
be.
Okay.
It can't be.
That was another thing I was taught. Like, the Bible, as it exists today, there is no errors, there is no contradictions.
Have you ever played that game? What was it, Telephone?
Yeah,
in middle school or in elementary school. Yeah, I mean, as soon as we cannot say that man has sin, that that he will commit sin through the flesh, and then say that he was able then to put every single word that God wanted on paper without a little bit of ad lib. With a little bit of a maybe not even ad lib, a misconception of what the true intent was,
or it was based on tradition, or it was based on the socioeconomic status of the world. Like, there was a lot of things after listening to the You Have Permission podcast. Like, they dissect the Bible, and they're like, well, take this verse for instance, and understand the historic context of what they were talking about and why they were talking about it, and
and what had to be done at that time.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but. Again, the way I was raised, we took those verses and we used them to attack people. We used them to build these guidelines for our lives without the context or the history behind them. Just like it's a sound bit thing. Mm-hmm. Like, you can take any verse in the Bible and you can use it any way you want. Like, without the context of maybe the verse before it or after it. And again, I've not read through the entire Bible myself, but I have studied it a good amount, like a lot over the years. But again, that was one of the pillars. When you go to a church, you need to make sure that they're a Bible believing. They believe that the Word of God is inerrant and has no mistakes, and there's nothing you can't and you're not allowed to question it. I mean, that's the way I was raised. So you can.
So now you're hearing all this, Alex. What's your
I'm curious for you, Jimmy. Did it come a point for you? Was your faith ever ruffled? Meaning, did it come a point where it's like some of the things maybe he's talking about Christianity, where they're the ones judging, not vice versa?
No,
were you like around?
Because I didn't grow up like that.
Okay.
So I mean, I definitely grew up where we're not perfect.
Yeah.
We're going to make mistakes. So when you are taught that, you then look at the pages assuming the exact same thing. You know, and I tell my son that, my daughter that all the time, that, you know, and just even with like their teachers, like where the age of my kids are right now, these teachers, like everything they say or do is supposed to be gospel. And I tell my kids, I say, listen, they're human. So we will always treat them with respect, just like I think we should. You know, if I go into a house of God, I don't care. You know, I was at a Seder 12 years ago, and I said, should I put the yarmulke on? I'm Christian. He said, well, just showing respect. It doesn't mean that you're actually Jewish. Yeah. Once he said that, I put it on. So I'm always going to show respect to that religious body to a certain point. However, it doesn't mean that I have to take it as gospel. So I told my son, I said, look, because he was having some issues. We found some holes in some of the stuff he was learning at school. I said, we will take it in. We will digest it. We will determine if we think it's true or not. But what we will always do is have respect for that person, because in their mind, they really do believe that what they're saying is true. I really do believe that. Now, you can have con men, you can have teachers that are trying to push an agenda, and that's a completely different conversation. But I do think that most people, there is a business side of the church, and I get that too. I think that most people that I have found, when it comes to major religion, they truly do believe and what they're saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how do you call someone a liar when the past experiences they've had, the things they've read, and the feelings that they have, that they're that adamant about that subject? You could disagree with it, but it doesn't mean that they're lying or they're trying to deter you or be negative in some way.
For sure. Yeah, because everybody's experience is different, right? Some people go through health things and they come out really good on the other side, and they could attribute that to the hand of God, and it's like, I'm not going to take that away from you. You know, it's whatever it is, and it's super fascinating. But
see, what's the other side of it though? So, and this is where I think you and I agree 1,000%, is that okay? So either there's the hand of God that is like a puppeteer that's constructing how your life is going to be. Okay, so that's great. So you got out of an adversity. You know, like my fall, great. I didn't die. I lived. Okay, so what about? So my first checkup, okay, I'm at a pediatric orthopedic office, and this 2.5-year-old who's riddled with cancer that has 6 months to live. Oh, so that's the hand of God? You can't have it both ways. Yeah. Either we have the ability to live our life and we have that freedom, or we don't. So yes, there's a balance. Maybe there are miracles that still happen, because I do believe that that miracles do happen, but it's so rare that you have to take some control over your life and believe what you're going to believe, but also take action and not just assume that because you pray every Thursday that all of a sudden money's going to start pouring in your account, or you're going to have a great relationship with your kids, or that your wife's not going to leave you. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, for sure. It's I just listened to this audiobook. It's like a couple weeks ago. I might have mentioned it to you guys, but if not, I would definitely recommend checking it out. It's called Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. Have you guys heard of it?
No. So I know Napoleon Hill pretty well.
Yeah, so he wrote the book back in like 1930s, right? And he wrote the book, and it's like an interview style where it's him, and I did the audiobook, so it's another voice that is the devil. And he has an agreement where he can ask the devil any question he wants, right? So he goes, and it's crazy that if I didn't tell you that it was made in 1930, you would think it was made like last week, because it's like it's minus the fact that he talks about Hitler and like some few other like wars that are going on back then.
We still talk about that today.
Yeah, but it's really interesting because it, even if you don't look at it in the aspect like I do, it's like, Jesus or the devil or God or hell, and it's really a fascinating book because it really breaks down more of the psychology about it, right? It's like free will. They go into like faith versus fear, right? And it's like, he talks about, like, because the devil, he's interviewing the devil, and the devil tells him like all his tricks, right? He tells him how he scares people into fear. Like there's like 6 tiers of the fear. The first one's poverty. The second one's health. I would have to look up the others to do it, but those all lock these people down to not be able to think on their own, right? And it frames it in a way to where, I guess for me, how I even approached the podcast at the beginning, it's more on like a psychology level. It's like, can you think on your own? Can you do the right things, or do you fall victim to, you're so scared to be broke, you don't make a move. You're so scared of you work so hard that your health falls apart, and now you can't make a move, right? You get stuck in these slumps, and then like that's in the book, it's the devil doing that, right? Whether it's the devil playing the puppet or whether it's just like the psychology part of it. It's a fascinating book because he really dives deep into all the angles that we all suffer for. Where, like, if you were to talk to maybe like a Christian, it would be like the devil and God, right? It would be like the good versus evil. But in this way, it kind of breaks it down more to like a. If you're not a big religious guy, it really it makes it interesting because it puts it in it makes you realize, for me, like when you start going down these paths, it's not like there's like the devil's like pushing you, right? So it's just
So now I think that I think that there are powers that are trying to help you kind of move down an area. Like I believe in free will, but just like my son. As I'm watching him grow up, I have to let him live his life. I have to have him fail. However, I'm there from time to time to try to guide him a little bit. They call it women's intuition. You can't tell me that a guy who's never cheated, and then all of a sudden on a business trip, he does something he's not supposed to do, and all of a sudden, for no reason, his wife is wondering what's going on. Like, where does that come from?
Yeah, there's something biological, or something.
There's something
crazy,
going on. So it could be. I could be absolutely wrong.
Yeah.
So when people talk about that, there's things that are happening. I do think that there's a little bit of sway from time to time. That I do believe. I think that and when you kind of look when folks think that everything happens exactly and God is with you every day, that I do not believe. But I think that from time to time,
in the sand.
Yeah, that's a guy that ran by earlier without a shirt on.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I mean, but again, that's all the stuff that I grew up learning and was taught to believe. I've been to churches recently that's why we don't go to church specifically right now, because I can't bring myself to do that yet, because I've got my own internal things that I have to deal with. But like, the pastor's standing up there, with using God as a reason or an excuse for people to give them money, to give their organization money. I get it. There are good things that churches do. They feed people, blah blah blah. But I have seen, there with the good, there's always the bad. I've worked at a church. I've worked at a mega church. I've seen the ugliness of what that is, and all under the guise of God, and that's the reason. And it's just like we've elevated, again, like we talked about earlier. We've elevated these pastors and these religious leaders to a position where they shouldn't be, because they're all human.
So this is my question, though. Okay, and this is not just in religion or church or it goes into business too. So I had a good friend of mine, him. Actually, he's been on your podcast, and I have not asked permission, so I'm not going to say his name. And so he was looking at the band at church, and he had all this negative. Oh, they should do this. They should do that. They said, okay, so are you just going to sit there and criticize, or were you placed here to actually jump in and help them with that thing that they are failing at? Now, I know what church you're talking about. It's a very large organization, and you alone probably wouldn't have been able to correct maybe some of the things they've got going on. But I think that when we see something in the world that we think is broken, rather than just saying, okay, this whole construct has failed, well, how can I bring some hope or some humble characteristics, or how can I bring some more, not just faith, but just truth into that organization? Because I know what you're talking about. I mean, there are a lot of organizations that they get to be more of a, even though they're a nonprofit, they start to operate like a business. And once you do that, under the scope of God and under the cross, it can be looked at very negatively.
Where do you draw the line? Because, and here's why I'm asking this. So I just moved into a new neighborhood. The HOA is a mess. The president, the lady that's the president, she's been that way. She's been the president for 12 years. She's been on the board of that HOA for 12 years. That's irresponsible, because that does not allow new people, new ideas, fresh ideas, blah, blah, blah. That the HOA organization is run, it's a shit show. Mm-hmm. They're wasting money. Our neighbor, there's things that need to be done.
That's why there's like 3 houses in there that are unincorporated, right?
Yes.
They've fenced off and they're not part of the HOA.
Totally.
I thought that was so cool.
It's a total shit show. So when I moved in the neighborhood, I recognized that issue, and I tried to get involved. I ran for the board, ended up not winning because I was the new guy and I was a little loud, and I'm literally like probably the youngest or one of the youngest homeowners in that association, and it's actually divided now. We had this in our other neighborhood where you were at. In the old neighborhood, it was pavers versus non-pavers. So people that wanted the roads paved and people that wanted to keep them dirt. In this neighborhood, it's people, old neighbors versus new neighbors. Basically, the people that have been here the longest, that's their claim to fame. They stand up and like, well, I've been here for 20 years, and they're afraid of change. So they think because they've been there for 20 years, they have more rights than somebody that's been there a year. Yeah. So, back to my question, like I tried to get involved, and now I'm so over the broken system. I want nothing to do with it. I'm gonna influence, hopefully, in another way. And I'm probably now I'm answering my own question because I got on like one of the committees, and I'm disenchanted. I'm over it. Like I'm over the bullshit that's going on there. So I don't even want to help anymore internally. So we have like a neighborhood Facebook group. What I want to do is infiltrate the neighborhood Facebook group and encourage people. Talk about personal development. Encourage people that are working out, because I see people working out. So. Where do you draw the line with that? Because, like, for me, I don't want, and this is just the history. I was involved in church for so long, and again, helped plan a church and stuff like that. For me to go back there right now and even put time to that, no thanks. Like, I can't, me running my business and stuff like that. So where do you draw the line?
So I think you definitely answered your own question. Because the thing is that, sometimes the results don't really get us what we're looking for, but it's the fact of taking action. Yeah. The fact that we're not going to just sit, on the sideline, that we're actually going to be involved. Because sometimes, the results that we're looking for, we're not going to get, but I'm not doing it for the results. Sometimes I'm doing it just because I said I'm going to do it this certain way. Yep. It's so funny, the two of the guys in my office, big Marvel fans, obviously stuff's coming out all the time. And they were talking about like who their best superhero, like which one would they be? And they're like, oh, well, Jim's definitely Captain America. I'm like, well, why do you say that? Like, because you always talk about doing the right thing. That's all I talk about. Yep. I'm not saying that I am pure, or I'm some Tim Tebow or even Captain America. I'm just saying that when put in that situation, faced with choice A or choice B, I'm always going to do what's what's the right thing. Yeah. That's why I love what was it, the second Frozen movie? I mean, I'm sitting there crying. My wife's like, why are you crying? I'm like, I love that. Do the next, when in doubt, do the next right thing. Yeah, and it's so true. So yeah, you definitely answered your own question. And look, sometimes the construct is so, large and it's so hard to overcome. And we have so much going on in our life that it's not worth the time. So there's smaller churches too that are in those infancy stages that maybe can grow up in a way that, don't follow some of the things, the negative traits that you saw some of the big churches do. And there's large churches that do it right, and there's some that, I mean, I'm not going to name any names, but good Lord, is it just riddled, with not just negativity, but fraud and money grabs. But there's a lot of organizations. Once, you have a lot of people who, there's some greed that gets involved. I mean, we've got
a lot. Yeah, there's a lot. That's Have you seen the Instagram, the Preachers and Sneakers Instagram?
No.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. But it's like they take pictures of like nationally well-known preachers, and they like break down their outfit and like put the price tags next to, and literally like screenshots of the website of where like somebody's wearing like a Prada belt and something like that, and like they total it at the bottom. So that's an unfortunate thing. That's the thing that makes me sick. Yeah. Like, and here's my take actually on specifically like the non-denominational celebrity pastor thing. This is my take on them. Please change my mind. All they are wannabe personal development speakers, and they're shitty at it because they're using God as their product. They're peddling God, and that's all they are is personal development speakers.
I'm not going to try to change your mind. That's your opinion. You've seen behind the curtain more than I have. I do think that you have a lot of people that they get a little bit of fame. They get a little bit of that showmanship and up on stage. And if you're not careful with that, I mean, it'll change a lot of what you're doing, and it'll actually change a lot of your actions and what you really came there to do. So you see a lot of that.
Yeah. You still go to church, Jimmy?
Mm-hmm.
You still go?
Yeah. I wouldn't say every Sunday.
Sure.
Yeah. But we pray. We pray before dinner, because I think that once again, I think it's more of not that building. And I know I was taught
That's
that.
What I was getting to. Yeah.
I was taught that.
You feel like you could continue on without going?
That's a good question.
I can definitely fill in the gaps without filling a void, for sure. Like I could, if I went to church, the actual building, once a month, but then me and my family continued to build our relationship and what we feel is our relationship with God, I would have zero problem with not going every Sunday.
That was frowned upon for me growing up. The fact that I'm not in church now, I've got friends that are still going to church and still believe the things that we grew up to believe, and they would look down upon me.
Yeah, that's the head of the church. Yeah. Your closest way to get to God is to go there, and that individual has a closer relationship with God. I'm telling you, my son. Yeah, I there's been times where an organization that really Common Gents is an organization that's close to my heart. Right now, and it should be for the last 10 years, our little girls have been getting a lot of support and really pushing them up so that they can be amazing young women. Unfortunately, our young boys in this country have been left behind, and this organization is really pushing on what it means to be a man. And we were praying over because we were really trying to figure out if we were going to continue the organization. I went and got my son, brought him over, and when we prayed, I made sure that he was within our group as we prayed, because so when I look at some of the things that he says and does at 5, 6, 7 years old, there's something to it. I mean, he is giving me more hope that and more faith than any pastor up on stage has.
Yeah, and let me clarify something, just because I've basically talked shit about my entire upbringing. There are churches that exist, and they were all over the news, like the God Hates Fags Church, Westboro Baptist Church. Those guys, that's a whole nother level, and I want to be clear. That's not the environment that I grew up in. It wasn't that hardcore, because those people I don't even
and you
know
have
what to say
churches
about
like Tom Tapania. I don't know if you've ever heard his story. Third highest in the Gambino family that found Christ. It was a double wide trailer, and for years and years was a double wide trailer. They had the money, but they put it back in the community. Yeah. So you have that side of it.
Yeah. So anyways, I wanted to clarify that, because that was, I'm sure people in my life are probably going to see this and they're going to hear it, and because I don't talk about this with the people closest to me really anymore, because it's just there's just no reason to, because it's almost like it's sensitive and it's almost like, again, there are people that I've grown up with and whatnot. They look down upon me. We had a term for it growing up, backslidden. They look at me and they say, "Oh, he's a backslidden Christian," and that's basically somebody that believed what we believed, was following what we believed, and now has slidden back to his old ways.
But isn't that like so that's so hypocritical, because if you have accepted Jesus in your life, aren't you going to the same place?
Well, yeah, because that's the get out of hell free card. That's the golden ticket. So again, there's so much here and so much to unpack, and I'm glad we had this conversation.
Well, I'm curious, Jimmy, what gives you the boost when you say you could probably go without going to that building? I'm just curious, what is it? Is it a feeling you get? Is it the stories you hear? Is it the people that are there? What kind of what would make you feel like there would be a possible void or a gap by not going? I'm just curious.
But so no, I would not feel a void.
You want it?
I would be fine with it. Now, do I go to church and hear some amazing messages? And there's times where, and I get that, where people say, "Oh, God put me in this seat on this given day."
Story,
and there are moments. I mean, we just listened to Arate, and there was a couple things that both Andy and Ed said that in that moment, that was a golden nugget for me. But I think so when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So there have been Sundays where I go there and I hear an amazing message in a moment that I needed to hear on that given day. Yeah. So I will always make a commitment to be plugged in. However, am I going to consider myself less of a Christian if I go 2-3 weeks without going in on Sunday? But me and my family, maybe we look at something, we watch it online, or we just have a conversation about who God is, or we read my son's child Bible. Yeah, if anyone calls me less of a Christian, it's not even like, because I think sometimes when we really feel that we are less of something, we get offended when that person says that. But when we know what we know, it's not even it's we don't even take offense to it. Yeah. I just wouldn't even. I let it slide over my back. I'm like, well, you have no clue who I am or what I believe. So that's I appreciate your opinion. Go on with your day. Yeah. So I would have zero problem continuing how I am continuing with how I entered the building and how I have an amazing relationship with God. Because there's people that go to church every Sunday. They will arrive. They will sit there and and listen to the message, and then as soon as they leave there, they just went there to check the box.
Yep.
The same thing with the gym. We used to talk about it. It's like, okay, you have that little keychain. Is that so you can pick up girls on Friday? Because I see you come in. Yeah, you post on on Instagram that I'm attending. I'm like, no, I've seen you.
Yeah,
you ain't attending. Like you're present, but you're not active. I'm never gonna need to go into the building to say that I have a good relationship with God.
Any other practices you feel, because I know you joined us it's been about a year ago when we started this podcast, 2 years ago when we did the Wim Hof breathing challenge.
Yeah.
Is there anything in that meditation realm, spirituality realm that you feel like the same thing?
No, I feel it more when my kids pray.
Okay.
And I would say too, when we had the girls, I was in a place where I really didn't have a great relationship with God. And so when our two girls came to us, 2.5 and a year and a half, through an organization called 4Kids down in Broward, my oldest would have nightmares. And so we had a trundle bed, so I'd pull out the trundle, and I had to lay down in the trundle next to her just so she could go to sleep for months when she first came to us. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm trying not to pass out because I don't want to wake up in this crummy trundle bed. I want to get back to my bed. So I said, well, what am I going to do here while I'm laying here? So I just started praying. So I think that her involvement in my life got me closer to God. Once again, I don't think that you have to follow some individual with a Prada belt up on stage to find a closer attachment to what's real, because those two little girls, when I look in their eyes, like that's stuff that brings me closer to, okay, there's something here. I mean, when how my son and my daughter operate and how our family, or when my son starts to pray and how he gets into depth about the things that he believes, like that gets me closer to God than going and reading a quick scripture and listening to people sing for 20 minutes.
Yeah, and that's one of the unfortunate things about the way I was raised. They discount a lot of things that are of the world. So the things that are happening, like meditation, like that almost was a bad word growing up because it's new age and so there's a lot of different techniques and even, like I said this earlier, but the church, I think, does a really bad job of dealing with mental health issues. Therapy and stuff like that. Because again, you these pastors that are running these churches, people go to them for counsel, and they with real issues, like really bad issues, and they're like, oh, well, just pray and have your devotion time and seek God. And there's people that I know personally that have been in that situation where they literally have mental health issues that need to be addressed by a licensed psychotherapist, and it needs to be addressed in a major way. It's not going to get better with them praying. Like I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen. So there's a lot of unfortunately there's a lot of practices and things like that are discounted through the church because it's considered worldly or of the devil or of the world. I'm using terminology that I was learned when I was growing up. So, but that's the thing that makes me sad because it's just there's so much mystery to this life, and for that worship of certainty to exist, and we have all the answers already. Basically we're looking at this life as just a waiting room to get to heaven. Like that's the mentality. And there's a verse in the Bible that you could use to back that up. Paul said, if to live is Christ, to die is gain. So for him to live, he would be putting out the attributes of Christ, whatever that means, as far as what he was, the context of that. But then if he dies, he goes to heaven. So again, that's the mindset, is this is just a waiting room. And then you couple that with the belief in the rapture, and the second coming of Christ and all that stuff. Again, that's another.
But I think if you're not happy with any organization, whether it's a church, a company, and you need to follow in some type of leadership that you agree with. I remember pastoring my church at Cornerstone. I had my long-term girlfriend, and I went to him with that serious problem, and he didn't say pray about it. We talked about it, and he said, look, he goes, I know your mentality. You're the type of guy that you're, running down the hill. You've got the musket in hand, flag in one. He said you need someone. Yeah. And he said that you need to have, when you come home, the person who patches you up. The challenge is the person you're with right now. She wants to be running down the hill with you. And we had a great conversation about what that looks like. Now my wife is, and she will run down the hill if necessary, but she's that exact person that I needed. So if you're unhappy with the leadership in any organization that you're a part of, I can guarantee you that if you look around and you really put some time into following an individual that you agree with, then it's going to be worth the time of spending for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's so I got this letter. It's probably been 2 or 3, 4 months ago. I got it from my grandmother. She lives up in Tennessee, so I don't see her too much. It's my mom's mom. So she wrote me this letter.
How old is she?
I would say
for context,
late 80s.
Okay.
I would say. Probably not much time left, right? So she wrote a letter. So that's why
she's not going to hear this, is she?
No, she don't want to hear this. So that's kind of getting to my point. So she wrote me this letter. I got it in the mail, and I figured it was gonna be like an emotional letter, right? Because I don't talk to her much, I don't see her much, I love her to death, but it's like, oh, I'm getting this handwritten letter, still in like this old style cursive, right? And I start reading it, and I'm kind of like tearing up as I'm reading it, but it's not saying anything. And then it gets to like after the first paragraph, like, I'm just writing this letter because I might not have much time left, but I just want you to know. And then it goes into a deep Jesus talk, right? Like, I really hope you accept Jesus Christ into your life, and it just went into this. As I'm reading, it's like I was getting watery-eyed, and then it kind of like dried. It was interesting because I was expecting to read like what did you learn in this life, right? Like, what are you going to pass down, right? Yeah. And I completely get her side, right? Like, she's on her last leg. She's always been a woman of Christ, and she's always been big into the Bible. She gave me a Bible when I was young. She's always been about it. So I get her takes. So that is her life advice, like, accept Jesus, right? Like, that's her thing. But it was interesting because I still haven't wrote her a letter back, because she's like, I want you to write a letter back, and I really hope that you've accepted Jesus Christ because I want to see you there one day. And it's just like, man, I want to show her this video, right? Because she's too old to even know what YouTube is. But it's like, how am I even going to write, like, I almost think, like, just lie and say, oh, I love it, just to like appease her and she passes away the right way, right? Yeah. If I like tell her like, I'm not sure about all this, it's like, I'm not sure. So that's kind of even bringing this topic up as a podcast. It's like, between that and a few other things the past like 6 months made me realize, like, even my son asking about this, like, it's like getting the wheels turning as far as like having more of a defined purpose of belief, I guess.
But I mean, could you just take it as, here's a woman who cares so much about you that she wrote you a letter?
So exactly. That's at the end of the day, yes.
Just write her a letter. Thanks, Grandma.
Send her $2 check.
Yeah.
Alex.
Well, because I have a guy in my organization that he brought for me and another guy the South Beach Diet book. Bought it for us and said, hey, I think we should all go on this. And both of them are definitely working on their dieting, and from a point I'm sitting there, I'm like, I'm getting ready at the time, was just finishing up 75 hard, was getting ready for another major, endurance race. And I'm like, wait, you're looking at this from the wrong perspective. Here's a person who took their hard-earned money, their time to come and say, hey, if I can help you in any way, be a better person. So it's just kind of changing, that paradigm of where they're coming from. I wouldn't lie to her, but I wouldn't just say thank you.
Right.
But just to know that person cared enough to actually put pen to paper.
Sure.
And that's kind of the context that me personally, if a family member of mine sent something like that, because we can disagree, and it's not even just that. Like, we think about, like, we talk about all the time, and this is for people that are watching this and people who get into podcasts and leadership. We've gotten good at communicating and understanding, like, what we want to get across to people. Not everyone's done that. Like, I look at family members of mine. They've never been in a position of leadership. They've not read the books that I've read. So sometimes their way of coming across and how they're going to try to communicate something to me is not going to be the way that I would do it personally to get the point across. So you got to think, her time. There was women in this country for a very long time that weren't able to really, give their opinion. So that's my opinion. That's how I would take it.
Yeah.
You're so old and wise.
Yeah, old Jimmy.
I am old.
No, I mean, it's a good point. Again, that's the mindset that she has. That's the mindset that I had growing up. And
yeah, it's basically like you were saying. It's like, accept him or expect the worst. Like, you're going to hell, kind of like in the most nicest way, right? Like,
in the most nicest way.
And I agree with Jimmy. Like, because I started reading the book 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson,
he's awesome.
Is phenomenal.
Oh yeah,
phenomenal. But one of his things that I'm hearing him say often, because I'm just diving into some of his stuff, is just tell the truth, and it's so true. And again, like the communication thing, that's such a good point. That's something that I'm trying to instill in my team right now, is like, take the time, because I used to be really bad at it, like taking the extra just few seconds to reread the email, to think about what you're saying, putting towards that effort. That it takes effort to communicate well, and you have to be purposeful about it. You have to put effort towards it, and I think that is important. So I would love to hear how that ends. I'd love to.
I'm gonna see her in like 1 month. I'm gonna have to write her. I want to write her a letter, right? Because I don't want her to go without.
You gonna type it out or?
Yeah, because my chicken scratch, she'll be like with her
that old fashioned.
She won't be able to make it out. So yeah, I'm gonna have to type it.
We could probably find a typewriter for you to type it
out.
Right?
Yeah, they might have like a cursive font.
Yeah,
right.
An
email.
Awesome. You guys want to add anything else?
I think that was a doozy.
We covered a bunch.
Maybe we have to do a part 2 of this.
Yeah.
Maybe after you talk to your grandma.
Yeah. We could do that. We could do that, and then we can always check back in, because I think this is an evolution as far as especially my thought about everything about my process. And I think the more and more people, like I've even asked, like Jason, the runner, when we were in New Jersey, I was asking him about it, because his whole book was about running on faith and God, and so it's interesting when you come at people just to talk about the conversation on more of just like wanting to learn and get your guys' side, rather than like no, this is the right way, you guys are crazy, you're going to hell. Like I think it's a good median, right? And I'm going to continue to do it, because I find it insightful, and I find this more beneficial than picking up the book. Right? Obviously there's some stuff in there that I'm not going to get from these conversations, but I find it more beneficial. I feel like I can listen to it more when I listen to people that have maybe read it, right? Like a lot of these self-development guys that I listen to are they've read the Bible, they live like a Christian lifestyle, right? And they might throw in a little thing or here or there, and I feel like I benefit from that more. It just sits in my brain better, right? Like I can interpret it and I can apply it in my life, rather than like reading the scripture. I'm like, oh my God, no,
and I think more and more, like we talked about a couple of the podcasts, where people are being more and more genuine with exactly their fears, the things they're not doing, properly. So I think that you may see, kind of an evolution of the Christian faith, and just of all religion, in general, because, it's one of those things where we all know that no one's perfect, but I think sometimes you see individuals that try to put that off, that everything in their life is great, family life's great, checking account's great, business is great. It's like, is it all? Really? It's all good?
Yeah.
Totally.
Cool, guys. Well, great episode. I really appreciate it. Guys, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, share this with everybody you know, and we will see you next time. See you guys.